At any points to pop questions in, and we will field them when we get to the Q&A part of the talk. And we'll aim to answer all of the questions that we can, but if we do end up with any questions that we haven't got around to answering, we will make sure that they are answered for you after the event. And so, to get us going, I'm going to hand straight over to Louisa. The floor is yours.
Great. Thanks very much, Kathy. 1 second while I just load up the slides. Okay, can you see that?
We can.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We are going to be talking through some of the findings from our 3rd annual survey of UK employees, which Caffeine has commissioned with Savanta, the data market research and advisory company. So we're going to spend about 15-20 minutes doing that, and then Kathy's going to field the questions, as she said. We will follow this webinar by sending you the slides, and then next week we'll send you a white paper of more of the detail behind it. So this is fairly top level today, but don't feel you have to take any notes because we'll follow up with a document.
So just first of all, a few pointers on the research that we conducted. As Louisa said, this is our 3rd annual survey of UK employees. The fieldwork was carried out in the first part of September this year, so very recent. And we heard from just over 1,000 employees across the UK, with a good spread across factors like age, gender, region, broad sector and company size to ensure that we get a good representative view of the UK workforce, and with the overall objective of understanding what the UK's employees want or expect from work and what makes them proud to work where they do.
And we started with one clear question in mind: what turns an employee into an advocate? It makes sense that employees are more likely to become brand ambassadors when they enjoy a great employee experience, but what exactly do UK employees want from that experience? And what can leaders of businesses do to ensure that their employees are proud to work there? Well, let's start with some good news. The survey found that businesses with leaders who are committed to purpose and values, who deliver an outstanding customer experience and an outstanding employee experience, are the ones their employees recommend, which sounds good, and it sounds like common sense. But the bad news, it might be common sense, but it's not common practice. Whilst thankfully there's some improvement from our survey last year, where only 21% of employees would recommend their employer, this year's figure of 29% is more in line with 2022's findings. And that still means that only 1/3 of employees would recommend their employer as a good place to work. So that means a lot of employees are working for organisations with leaders who are not committed to purpose or values, who don't deliver an outstanding customer experience, and who are clearly not delivering an outstanding employee experience either. And the survey found that companies that focus on providing a great employee and customer experience achieve high levels of pride and advocacy. We ran a correlation analysis on people's likelihood to recommend their employer as a place to work. And you'll see the ranking of what correlates most strongly with employee advocacy shows that it's the employees with an ethos of continuous improvement to the employee experience that come out on top. But why is building an outstanding or even a decent employee experience worth doing in the first place? And why is it important? Why do we keep talking about pride in the workplace? Well, our belief is that for your business strategy to succeed, you need to provide employees with experiences that empower them and inspire pride. And growing employee pride is a powerful proxy for advancing those key business imperatives, including talent attraction, retention, engagement, and ultimately advocacy. And brand-led leadership and a strong employee experience drives the behaviour of your employees towards customers or clients. This in turn drives customer satisfaction, brand loyalty, and ultimately profitability and growth. And having satisfied or engaged employees makes good commercial sense too. There are myriad statistics that prove this, and this is one of the most recent that demonstrates the importance of having an engaged and motivated workforce, given that it decreases staff turnover, it can increase revenue by a third, and will deliver 4 times more profit. So what does drive employee engagement and satisfaction? Now, you're probably very familiar with psychologist Frederick Herzberg's 2-factor theory. He revealed that certain characteristics of a job are consistently related to job dissatisfaction, while different factors are related with job satisfaction. So those factors for dissatisfaction include salary and benefits, company policies, the relationship that employees have with their supervisor and their peer group, work conditions and security, so also known as hygiene factors. Whilst factors for satisfaction include achievement, the work itself, advancement, growth, and they are the motivator factors. And according to Herzberg, the factors leading to job satisfaction are separate and distinct from those that lead to job dissatisfaction. Therefore, if you set out eliminating dissatisfying job factors, you might create peace, but you won't necessarily improve and enhance performance. But you'll placate your workforce instead of actually motivating them to improve performance. Essentially, when the hygiene factors have been adequately addressed, people won't be dissatisfied, nor will they be satisfied. So if we want to motivate our people, we have to focus on the satisfaction factors like achievement, recognition, and responsibility. Or to borrow from Daniel Pink, we have to give employees autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
So, if that's the why we believe employee engagement is so important, we're going to take a look now at what the 3 key findings are from this year's survey. Firstly, employees recognise the importance of effective leadership, but we found that they're often feeling that it's lacking in reality. So in other words, there is a leadership gap. We asked people to rate out of 10 various aspects of their working environment and working life in terms of both how important they are to them and also how they felt their employer performed against them. And we see there the quality of leadership remains a problem for UK employers. It shows the biggest gap between importance and performance after competitive pay. And what's likely to be driving that leadership gap is employees feeling that they are not motivated by their leaders. Also, that their leaders are not focused on making their company a great place to work or improving what it's like to work at that organisation. Less than half of UK employees felt that their employer sought to understand what matters to them as an employee of the organisation. And another gap was revealed between how important employees felt their relationship was with their immediate line manager and how they perceived their managers caring about them. So 68% of respondents rated the quality of their relationship as important, yet only half of them felt that their manager cared about their experience of work. However, those leaders who are getting it right and have employees score them highly on leadership quality, effectiveness, motivation, and their efforts to make a company a great place to work achieve higher rates of pride and advocacy.
The second key insight is around purpose and values. And here it turns out there is a problem. Everyone here today knows probably better than most what a company purpose is, the reason why a business exists beyond the sole goal of making a profit, the guiding vision that reflects the company's values, goals, and mission. And as a company that helps organisations articulate their purpose, we were curious to see how embedded purpose was in UK organisations and also investigate how connected or aligned employees felt to the purpose. So it was encouraging to find that 74% of UK employees worked for an organisation that did have a purpose. And there's an additional 13% who may also work for an employer with a purpose, they just don't know it. And the figures were even more encouraging when we asked whether employees knew what their purpose was. So of those who said their employer had a purpose, almost 90% of respondents said, yep, we know what that purpose is. But before we get too excited, this is the bad news, this is the problem. There's another gap between knowing the organisation's purpose and acting in accordance with that purpose. And here, leaders are felt to be as lacking in actually doing this as their colleagues. And when it came to values, it was even worse. But before we reveal that score, we just wanted to stop here for a quick poll.
Yes, indeed. So, folks, you should see on your screen the ability to have a look at our poll around values. And for many of us, we will have worked in organisations that have specific values. Some of us will have worked in organisations where values were perhaps less specific, not explicit, but implicit. So please have a look through that list and vote for every value that you recall in any of the roles that you've had over your career, and pop them in there. So you should be able to vote for multiple. There we go, and we can submit. And just to Ollie and Louisa, while we're having letting our people have a look there, or letting our audience go through those values, what are the things that you've seen within organisations where values are really not expressed or are not felt by the organisation? Because obviously we know that it's great if they're positive and there, but what's the downside of that?
Well, we often see values on a wall. You know, companies put the values on a wall, they're visible in the organisation, but they're not actually demonstrated by leadership, and therefore they're not demonstrated by the people. So those values don't translate into behaviour, and that's the downside that we see.
No, absolutely. I've seen that myself, having worked in organisations with very strong values, and then come out generally into smaller organisations where, again, it's perhaps less explicit, and there's just a lack of clarity and anything to guide, I suppose, day-to-day culture and day-to-day working.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I think when you're a smaller company, actually, it gives you a little bit more liberty to really hone those values to demonstrate what makes you different. So if I just talk about the Caffeine values, our values are respectfully disrespectful, we act with heart and conscience, and we're about rigor and vigor. So we're about doing things at pace, but to a high standard. And I think we are a relatively small company, but everyone knows the values. It gives people license to respectfully, disrespectfully advise our clients.
I think there's a lovely piece there, Louisa, around the fact that those are couched in quite human language. And it can be quite difficult when they're simply one word and you've got to try and interpret quite often for yourself, really, what that means. I worked for an organisation where heart was a value, and that's really quite difficult to put across and to connect to. Whereas exactly like you've just described, one of the ones that struck me the most was I did some work with Innocent Drinks quite early on, and they had a great value which was "Don't be lame," which I just really liked, and they had great underlying sort of understanding of what that actually meant in their context. But the fact that it was so human, I think, was incredible. And we're starting to see, obviously from our audience and our poll results here, that collaboration particularly is coming out very strongly. That's at the top there, with 14% of people having experienced that in a workplace, and respect certainly up there, along with integrity, which I think is interesting.
Okay, great, excellent. Yeah, no, that "don't be lame" is a brilliant example of, you might not be able to describe that, but you certainly know, you can feel it, can't you? You will know lame behaviour if you see it. So
absolutely,
great. Excellent. All right. Shall I carry on?
I think so. Yes, we've reached a halt with people adding to that. So yeah.
Terrific. Thank you. Okay. We wanted to ask about values because we work with lots of different organisations, and as we do that, we noticed the same values being referenced by companies time after time. So we wanted to test how prevalent this was. Done that. So this year, for the first time in the survey, we provided a list of values and asked employees to let us know which ones their employer had as part of their stated values. And as suspected, almost all companies have a similar list of generic values, with the top 4 being respect, trust, professionalism, and integrity. So over half of all the employees had these same values. And similar to purpose, the majority of organisations have a set of values. But again, there's a disconnect between what companies say and what employees believe their leaders do. So only half of respondents felt that their organisation's culture actively reflected the stated values, and only around half felt that their colleagues and leaders lived the values. And that resulted in only half of the respondents saying that their organisation's values instilled a sense of pride in them. And we might have highlighted how generic the company values are, but the fact is that, unsurprisingly, trust and respect are important to us as employees, and specifically the sense of autonomy and mastery people feel when they are trusted to do a good job. That's the most important factor in driving people's satisfaction with their job. And just behind, in terms of importance, is being recognised. In other words, respected for your contribution and achievements. Now, this clearly goes beyond pay, which we know is important, and extends to the regular appreciation that line managers and colleagues show for job well done. But let's look at the other factors that employees say are important to them in driving that sense of mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So having the opportunity to progress and acquire new responsibilities, together with the ability and encouragement to acquire new knowledge and competencies, puts an onus on line managers in particular to have clear plans in place for the development of each of the people that they're responsible for. And being set clear goals and expectations puts an onus on leaders to provide clarity on individual and team roles, responsibilities, and expectations, alongside a cross-company understanding of common goals and cross-functional working to achieve them, so avoiding silo working. And working for an organisation with a clear purpose or vision is foundational to making a company a great place to work and not just a place to do work. But again, sadly, there's a gap between how important trust and respect are to employees and whether they actually feel trusted and respected. 61% of employees said they felt they were trusted to do a good job, and only 44% felt they were recognised for their contributions and achievements.
Thanks, Louisa. So the third key insight from this year's survey was around new questions we introduced this year on the hot topic of AI. And we wanted to get an understanding of the level of adoption of AI in the UK workplace, and also how employees felt about it. And it turns out, although the use of AI seems to be on the rise in all aspects of life, only 39% of respondents said their employer was actively using it, although another 13% said don't know, so maybe slightly higher than that. What did surprise us is that similar proportions are excited by the prospect of AI as the proportion that said they're fearful. That said, perhaps reflecting that most people aren't seeing it used in their jobs yet, nearly half haven't made up their mind and kind of sit on the fence when it comes to this. However, those that have had AI introduced into the workplace are extremely positive about its impact. And that supports, what companies probably in a range of sectors, particularly maybe in the technology space, have seen in that the introduction of AI has meant increased efficiencies due to the removal of tedious and repetitive tasks, resulting in time saving and job enrichment for employees. So it's early days for AI, and clearly we're only speaking to people who have already have a job, not those whose jobs have been lost to AI. So those people may have a different view. However, it's certainly one topic to keep an eye on next year.
So in the final part of our presentation, we're just going to summarise those key learnings of for leaders coming out of the survey and highlight the implications for each. So number one, the quality of leadership remains a problem for UK employers. We've seen this in the last couple of surveys as well. After competitive pay, it's the biggest gap between how important it is to employees and how well they feel their leaders actually perform. And there's a problem with purpose. It's not being operationalized into the business, and company values are often generic words which fail to translate into active behaviors. And fear-mongering around AI, on a more positive note, is largely ignored by UK employees who feel excited about its possibilities and relish the opportunity to relinquish some of those repetitive and tedious tasks. So implications for leaders. So leaders must, continuously focus on making their organisation a great place to work. So it's not just overseeing the work of the organisation, but focusing on the working environment too. Understanding what matters most to the people that they lead, and that's in terms of their personal goals and ambitions. And by doing this, you have to have a high level of trust, people development and recognition, and clarity of shared goals. Also, joined up working between teams to get things done. That's what employees are crying out for. Secondly, purpose and values need to drive companies' decision making, and they need to be communicated regularly. So employees want to see leaders living the values through behaviour. Otherwise, they just cynically see it as meaningless copy or marketing speak. And there's an opportunity here to actually lean into the benefits AI can provide, welcome the opportunity to outsource those tasks that can sap employees' spirit, use AI to free employees to do more meaningful and motivating work. So we started our presentation with this question about what turns an employee into an advocate. And we covered this in terms of working with businesses with leaders who are committed to purpose and values, who deliver outstanding customer or client experiences and outstanding employee experiences, are the ones their employees recommend and are proud to work for. And ultimately, it comes back to the service profit chain. If you want your people to feel proud of working for you, you've got to put people before profit. Look after your people, they will look after your customers. Happy customers mean more loyal customers, which means repeat purchases and increased revenue and growth. With better understanding of what motivates employees and what drives employee pride, we're hopeful that next year, more than 31% of employees will recommend their employer as a great place to work. Because when we spend an average of 84,365 hours in a lifetime at work, our employee experience should be a positive one, shouldn't it? Finally, thank you for listening to these key findings and the implications from this year's survey. We're a reminder that we will send you the slides at the end of this week, and we will send you a white paper with a bit more information next week. So I'm going to now hand back to Kathy, who's going to take your questions.
I am indeed. So if any of that has sparked some thinking for you, it certainly has for me, then please pop your questions in the chat and we will put them to Louisa and Ollie. And as we're doing that, we've had a couple of comments come in around the values. Jodie says, do good, be good is one of their values, which represents their charities initiatives. I think that's a really good example of that human language element that we were talking about earlier. And Richard says that he was surprised customer focus was not higher on the list. And I think that plays into your last slide there, Louisa, around that connection between employee satisfaction and customer loyalty. So I don't know if they've got anything that you can dig into a little bit there.
Yeah, I think that's true. It is back to the service profit chain. When employees are really clear on their line of sight to the customer, the client, whether they're client or customer facing or not, but they kind of understand who that customer is and know where they fit in in terms of the work that they do has an impact on the customer, then we know from our work around customer experience that you get high levels of engagement from employees, and that has a positive knock-on effect to the experience that the customers achieve. So it is that kind of virtuous circle.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got a question from Jo, and she says, any particular big surprises in this year's survey?
Yes, I think, well, sorry, Ollie, I'm jumping in, but
go for it.
Okay, my surprise was around the AI answer section, because I think if you read the trade press, if you read the the media, AI is going to eat our lunch. It's going to take all our jobs. We're going to be unemployed, and it's going to just be it's always a negative story. And I'm sure there are a lot of negative aspects to AI, but what employees are seeing are the upsides of getting rid of some of those monotonous and repetitive tasks. And I think AI AI is happening a little bit by stealth, but we're really benefiting from that.
Ollie,
I was going to say, I think that is maybe the main surprise, particularly, that question around, those who have seen AI coming to their workplace, the fact it's sort of overwhelming, sort of been received positively by employees. Otherwise, I think nothing really in the way of surprise, which is probably a good thing. Where we want to probably feel the results coming through are relatable and reflect real life experiences. But I think they probably just re-emphasize some of the patterns we see and challenges that we know businesses face when they come to implementing purpose and values. The fact that people recognize they're there, but they don't see them being lived out, for instance. So otherwise kind of repeating patterns we might have seen elsewhere, but still helpful, I think, in terms of then discussing how do we make those changes so that people feel that purpose and values are actually being taken seriously and not just lip service.
No, absolutely. So we've got two questions which are slightly related, so I'm going to conflate them together, and then I'm going to be immensely cheeky, and I'm going to actually add to it myself, because it's a question that came up for me as well through this. And I mean, my last 15 years have absolutely been spent in the employee engagement world, employee experience, all of that. So Mary has asked, are there any observations on the change in survey results over the years? And Rowan has asked, why is it so hard for organisations to make improvements, given that the evidence of the benefits has been around for ages? And that was my observation, is that we largely speaking, we know this stuff. This isn't actually anything different to the McLeod report, which came out in 2020, which sort of forms a basis of a lot of people's understanding of employee engagement and the benefits it brings to an organisation. So why are we finding it so hard to actually change this?
Well, I take the first one, Louise, and then you might want to come in on that one. I think in terms of the change on survey results over the years, we did change quite a lot in the survey this year. So the sections on purpose, values and AI were new questions that we brought in, but the ones that were the same as last year, which is part of the questions in that first sort of key insight section on the leadership gap, not really any significant changes. Like the patterns and the story is still the same. You may have noticed one which may have jumped out to you on one of the initial slides around the net promoter score question. So would you recommend your employers a place to work? It's jumped a little bit around, a little bit over time. So it dipped last year and it's come back up this year to the same level as 2022. That may just be a blip. I think overall, what you see in that question is you've got roughly equal numbers of employees saying that they are advocates as those who are passive, as those who are detractors, and that's a little bit of variation, but it's kind of the same through the 3 years that we've done this.
And it absolutely echoes research that's been done through Engage for Success and a number of the other related organisations. So I think genuinely Rowan's question is really interesting. Is why are we not managing to move that really to any great degree?
Well, I think one of the let's turn it on its head and say, when companies are successful, what do they do? And we found that it needs what we call triad power. So you need it needs to be led from the CEO. It has to be a board board decision, and it has to be on the board and a board priority. And then triad power of marketing, HR, and operations, and working together on cross-functional groups who are all focused on ensuring that customer experience and the employee experience is aligned. What generally happens when it doesn't work is that it sits in one particular, it becomes the customer experience director's job, and
or it sits in HR, which is
exactly
perhaps from the running of the organization, and
it just goes down the priority list. So it has to be a business strategy that is led by the CEO, and it has to be a cross-functional team working together with a clear priorities and clear I think prioritization is a key thing as well, because you just have to be really disciplined on, we can do a few things that are going to have the biggest impact. So we always start with starting with the customer, starting with the employee, what matters most, and then delivering a clear program against that.
And I think as well, just explicitly linking the two. I think too often they're treated as separate things, CX and EX, whereas they should be completely linked and then together driving the positive business outcomes.
Yes, I would agree. Ashley says, are there noticeable differences by sector?
There's only so much we can say on this. I mean, we tried to get a sample which was a good sort of cross-representation of business size and sectors. The only real way we can break it down with any sort of certainty is sort of looking at public sector, private sector, and the not-for-profit side of things. Even then, there's not too much difference in the overall themes. There's a couple of things which did jump out on some of the purpose type questions. Those who are working for the sort of not-for-profit organizations have slightly higher scores, which maybe not surprising. Maybe that's easier to achieve if you're working in the not-for-profit sector in terms of the purpose side of things. On the AI questions, again, not too surprising. We saw like the sort of levels of adoption highest in the private sector, and with sort of more sort of mid-sized to larger companies rather than SMEs.
No, absolutely. And Charlotte says, and again, this is perhaps a little lead on from our how do we make a difference to this question. Do you have any research or insights into how to actually go about creating values for a company? And so how you go through that to ensure that they're authentic and that they're aspirational. I've been through this myself in my very first CEO role. So I came into an organization which did not have explicit values, and it's not easy, I have to say. So what have you got that's in that space?
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of the work that we do is working with companies to help them do that. And the key word is help. It's not us coming in saying, hey, these are the values you should have. It is about talking to people within the organization about when you are at your best, what do you do? And then having one sort of group discussions, interviews, getting a sense, and also speaking to customers and clients of that company when they're at their best, what do they do? And then you're trying to recognize that you want to create something that's relevant, but also something that's a little bit aspirational and something that is motivational as well. So I mean, my pet hate is passion. I think that's really, I love my job. Am I passionate about it every day? No, but that doesn't stop me from doing, I think, a really good job. And I love the people I work with, all those kind of things. But passion wouldn't be a motivational thing for me. But being respectfully disrespectful, acting with heart and conscience, yes, that's motivational. So I think Charlotte's point about they have to be authentic, but they have to be aspirational. And I think they have to also, people want, the great British public is a little bit cynical sometimes. So people have to feel that they are right for them and that they feel comfortable.
And sometimes it's that very practical element of, we may have come together as stakeholders and employees and leaders for an organization and come up with this list of words, but what does that actually mean in terms of our day-to-day operation, our day-to-day actions? And that can be quite hard, I think, for people to operationalize, as we've said.
Yeah, and you're right, and it has to all those values have to have behaviours associated with it. So if our value is X, then how do we behave? And I think then it also becomes it becomes beholden on us as an organisation to call people out when they're not acting in line with those values, and also recognise when they are, and positive reinforcement and feedback when people are living the values.
Yes, absolutely. We say that phrase, living the values, and of course it's a very corporate speak type thing to say, but it can be incredibly fulfilling and rewarding to realise that you're doing that, when those values actually resonate with you. Similarly to a purpose, if we feel emotional connection to it. One of the organisations that I worked for, which people will immediately know what it is when I say this, but for a long time had the purpose of it's good to talk. Right, yes. And actually, it didn't matter where you were in the organisation, that resonated with you. So I was running mainframe capacity planning at that point, which is about as far from a real customer as you could possibly be. But it's good to talk told you how your role fitted and what that, essentially a societal good you were contributing to, and it was genuinely very motivating. And then obviously as things change and people change at the top, and we ended up for a while with essentially a very operational iteration of that purpose, which was let's roll out superfast broadband, and you lose all of that emotional connection, which is such a shame.
Yes, yeah, exactly. We're all humans, aren't we? And we think we're lovely, rational people, but we're emotional, and we go on feelings, and it's really important.
No, we definitely do. So Mary made a comment to say that it was interesting to see that the impact of the increases in things like autonomy and flexible working arrangements, perhaps not overtly coming through in some of the research. And obviously that has changed significantly over the last few years, and perception of those things has changed, I would say, as well. But are there areas other than perhaps the positivity around AI where that's coming through in this set of research?
Yeah, we might not have drawn it out too much today, but in one of the charts when we were talking about sort of the importance of, the leadership gap, importance and performance and quality of leadership, flexible working is one of the factors we did ask about in there. It does come through as important, not quite as important as things like safe working environment, quality of relationships with colleagues and managers, the quality and effective leadership that we talked about, seen as more important, kind of ranked alongside things like opportunity to acquire new skills, opportunity to progress, that kind of thing. Interestingly, it is one of those factors where actually the importance is a little bit more aligned with how well they feel that their employer is performing on it. I also think it's become, over the years, I think we focused a little bit more on this when we looked at the survey last year, but it feels like it's becoming more and more expected as part of the job now, the flexible working side of things. And when there's things in the news about employers getting people back into the office, it's sort of treated, that's quite a negative narrative that accompanies that.
Yes, definitely. Rowan says that FedEx employees apparently score their leaders against the values of the organisation. And if they don't score above the set standard, the leaders are not paid a bonus. So what do you think of that as an approach to take?
Well, that sounds like operationalizing purpose and values, doesn't it? So I think that's great, because I think also it's it's not just about what employers want, and if your values align with FedEx's, then you're going to be in the right place, and you're going to do your best work, and I don't think that's going to be a struggle for you, because you should actually, it fits with you're aligned. So I think that's really great. It's a filtering process, isn't it, to get the right people on the bus.
It is.
Or the truck. Sorry.
As long as leaders aren't sort of creating the wrong behaviours in terms of how they're dealing with employees when those surveys come around, of course.
Yes, indeed. There are always pitfalls. So we've got one final question, which is from Camilla. Do you think AI in the workplace can positively impact an employee's sense of mastery?
Ooh, let's go for yes. I think that, I mean, you know, it depends. I think AI is about, I mean, there's the mastery of the AI itself, and then there's AI enabling you to do the work that only you can do. So by taking out some of the non-essential, more admin-based terms. I think it's quite a broad question, but I think what we've heard from the survey is that people are feeling that actually it's helping them rather than hindering them at the moment.
Excellent. So in wind up, I'm going to ask the two of you, what's the key insight from the work that you would like everybody to take away? Obviously, you may have the same one between you. You may both have a different take on that.
Mine would be the importance of linking the employee experience to the customer experience. They shouldn't work in isolation.
Perfect. Ollie?
And I'd probably pick out the stuff around purpose and values, and just the very obvious gap between the fact that most organizations seem to have them, but a much lower proportion are actually living them out day to day, and therefore there's a massive gap there, and lots of employers a lot of work to do in terms of how to bring them to life and actually make them part of working at that organization.
So true. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Some absolutely fantastic questions. So thank you to you folk out there in the audience. The webinar recording will be shared shortly. So do look out for the link in your inbox. And of course, Louisa and Ollie will be also following up with the white paper in a little while. Before we log off, I want to thank both Louisa and Ollie themselves, and of course the Caffeine Partnership for sponsoring the session. We've got some really great comments positively within the chat as well about the level of engaging content and how much people have enjoyed it. So I think we've all done a very good job. And thank you so much, of course, to our audience for joining us today. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.